The dorm room smelled faintly of new paint and recycled air. Eli sat on the narrow bed, nervously tapping his fingers against the metal frame. This was his second semester at the Galactic Academy on Luna 3, a place filled with every kind of student the universe could offer. He'd shared a room before with a grumpy kid from Mars, but this time it was different. His new roommate wasn't human. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Eli looked up. A tall figure stepped inside, moving slowly as if measuring the space. Her skin shimmered faintly like glass under moonlight, and her eyes, silver and calm, studied everything with a precision that made Eli's throat go dry. She wore a dark blue uniform with strange geometric symbols running along the sleeves. "Greetings," she said. Her voice was smooth, without emotion. "I am Lyra of the Cathari Exchange Program. This unit will share living quarters with you." Eli blinked. "This unit?" Hi," he said, trying to sound normal. "I'm Eli, just a regular human guy." "Welcome to Luna 3, Lyra didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just tilted her head slightly, as if analyzing him like a specimen in a lab. "I have read about your species," she said. "Humans display excessive emotional variance. I will observe this." Eli gave an awkward laugh. "You make it sound like an experiment." "It is," she replied simply, placing a small silver recorder on the desk. "My assignment requires me to understand human bonding behavior. I have chosen to begin with a live subject. You." Eli froze halfway through unpacking his bag. "Wait, you mean me?" "Yes," Lyra said, tapping her wrist console. "You have average social intelligence, mild empathy, and a stable environment. You are a suitable test subject." Eli's mouth twitched. "Wow, thanks, that's very flattering." Lyra didn't catch the sarcasm. "Flattery is unnecessary." He sighed and leaned back. "All right, Miss Science Project. I guess we'll be roommates." She didn't react, just began to organize her belongings. Strange hexagonal boxes that clicked and rearranged themselves like puzzle pieces. Eli watched her silently. Every movement she made was deliberate, almost robotic. No hesitation, no emotion, it was eerie. Still, he tried to make her feel welcome. "So, do Cathari people eat normal food, or—" She paused, glancing at him. "Consumption of organic matter is optional. Nutrient infusions are sufficient." "Right," Eli muttered. "You're gonna love pizza night." Lyra tilted her head again. "Pizza? It's—" "Never mind. You'll see." For a while, silence filled the room. Outside, the faint hum of the lunar power grid echoed through the walls. Lyra stood by the window, watching the earth hanging in the distance like a blue jewel. Eli noticed something in her posture, something small like curiosity. But she quickly hid it behind her usual calm expression. He decided to try again. "It's beautiful, right? Earth, I mean." Lyra didn't answer for a few seconds. "It is visually balanced," she said finally. "Your species seems to form emotional attachments even to planets." "Why?" Eli smiled faintly. "Because it's home. Everything we love started there." Lyra turned her gaze back to him. "Define love," he chuckled softly. "That's complicated. You'll understand someday." She stared at him for a long moment, then typed something on her console. "Observation 1, she said aloud. "Humans form emotional responses to abstract concepts such as home, possible evolutionary inefficiency." Eli rolled his eyes. "Or maybe it's what makes us human." Lyra didn't respond, but when she sat down at her desk, Eli could swear her fingers hesitated just for a second before typing. That night, Eli lay awake on his bed, listening to the quiet hum of alien machinery. Lyra sat across the room, eyes glowing faintly as she reviewed her notes. She didn't seem tired. She didn't even seem alive in the way humans did. No sighs, no stretches, no absent humming. Just silence. Eli turned toward her. "Hey, Lyra." "Yes?" "When you say you're studying bonding, what do you think it is?" She looked up. "A form of social cooperation driven by chemical impulses. Unnecessary yet common among your kind?" He smiled sleepily. "Maybe it's more than that. Maybe bonding is what keeps us together when logic fails." Her silver eyes reflected the dim blue lights of the room.
"Logic does not fail," she said softly. "Sometimes it does," Eli murmured.
"But people don't." Lyra didn't answer. She watched him as his eyes closed, his breathing slow and calm. Something stirred in her chest, a strange warmth she couldn't explain. She touched her wrist console and hesitated to type. Then quietly she whispered to herself, Observation 2. Human presence. Alters internal stability. She didn't understand what that meant yet, but she would. Lyra began her experiment on a Monday morning. The first week of classes had just started, and while most students complained about long lectures and late-night assignments, Lyra was completely focused on one thing: understanding human bonding. She carried a small holographic notebook everywhere, recording Eli's behavior like a scientist studying a rare creature. When he laughed with his friends in the corridor, she noted, human bonding includes sound-based emotional exchange, laughter. Appears illogical but produces visible comfort. When he offered to carry her extra textbooks, she wrote, unsolicited assistance detected. Motive uncertain, perhaps dominance ritual or mutual benefit display. Eli noticed her constant observation. You know, you don't have to take notes every time I sneeze, he said one morning as they walked to the academy's common hall. I am documenting, she replied seriously. Sneeze is an involuntary expulsion of air and mucus. Yet others respond with the phrase, bless you. This ritual confuses me. He grinned. It's just being polite. Politeness, she repeated, typing quickly. A social mechanism to avoid conflict, noted. Eli laughed again, shaking his head. You really are something else, Lyra. That night, she asked to observe casual human recreation. So Eli invited her to sit with him in the dorm lounge. He played soft earth music through his tablet, something slow and calm. The melody filled the air with warmth like sunlight through water. Lyra sat stiffly, her silver eyes flicking around. What is this rhythmic noise? It's not noise, Eli said. It's music. It helps people feel things, she frowned. Feel what? Whatever the song makes them remember. Or imagine. He leaned back, eyes half closed as the guitar played. Sometimes it makes me think of home. My mom cooking breakfast. The smell of rain. Lyra tilted her head, confused but intrigued. Your species recreates emotional states through sound. Yeah, Eli said softly. We use it to connect, to remember who we are. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Strange, she whispered. Cathary communication excludes emotional tones. We only transmit data. Eli smiled. Maybe that's why you feel so empty sometimes, she froze. Empty? I mean, he said quickly, realizing he might have said too much. You always talk like a machine, but I think there's something inside you that wants more than data. Lyra looked away. Her fingers tightened around her notebook. Desire is a chemical illusion, she muttered. It corrupts logic. But later, when Eli fell asleep on the couch, she sat there listening to the faint music still playing from his tablet. The slow, gentle melody echoed inside her, and for the first time she didn't write anything down. She just listened. The next day, her experiment continued. She followed Eli to the cafeteria, where humans sat in small groups, talking, laughing, and sharing food. She observed quietly as he greeted everyone with easy warmth. He offered his seat to a tired classmate and split his dessert with another. Lyra frowned. You give away your resources, yet you appear pleased. Explain. Eli smiled as he handed her a small piece of chocolate. Because making others happy makes me happy too. She examined the piece carefully. It's inefficient. Maybe, he said. But it's worth it. She placed the chocolate on her tongue. Her expression didn't change for a few seconds, but then her eyes widened. This unflavor stimulates my entire system. Eli grinned. Welcome to the human experience. She blinked rapidly, struggling to put the sensation into words. It wasn't logical. It wasn't measurable. It just was. Something bright, strange, and new. That night she made a new entry in her log. Observation 5. Emotional bonding may involve shared sensory experiences. The subject, Eli, demonstrates constant willingness to share. Unknown reason, possibly linked to survival instinct or trust reinforcement, but she paused before closing the log. Her reflection in the screen looked different, her silver eyes softer somehow. She whispered to herself. Observation 6. When near the human subject, my internal energy fluctuations increase. This is discomforting. Then she hesitated, adding quietly, or perhaps not discomforting. Perhaps something else. The next morning, when Eli offered her a simple greeting, "Morning, Lyra," she responded automatically, but her voice was lighter than before. Good morning, Eli. He blinked, a little surprised. It was the first time she had said his name without sounding like she was reading from a report. Later that day, when the class ended, she walked beside him without saying anything. Her recorder stayed in her pocket. For once, she didn't feel the need to analyze every word, every action. She just wanted to understand why being near him made her circuits hum and her thoughts soften. She didn't yet realize it, but the experiment was no longer about studying bonding. It had already begun. The days passed and Lyra's experiment slowly changed shape. At first, she had only observed from a distance, quiet, cold, and careful. But now she began to participate. Eli didn't ask her to. She just started doing things humans did, as if trying to decode a secret language written not in words, but in actions. It began one evening when Eli invited her to join a small group of friends for dinner in the campus cafeteria. The place was noisy, filled with laughter, smells of fried food, and the constant clatter of trays. For Lyra, it was chaos, too loud, too unpredictable, yet she followed Eli, clutching her notebook like a shield. "Hey, everyone," Eli said, smiling. "This is Lyra, my roommate. She's from Kethar." A few humans waved, friendly but curious. Lyra sat stiffly beside Eli, her silver eyes scanning every movement, every expression. When a student cracked a joke, the table erupted in laughter. Lyra jumped, slightly startled. "Why are they producing loud noises?" she whispered. Eli chuckled. "They're laughing. It's how we show we're happy," she frowned. "You release air from your lungs to indicate joy?" He grinned. "Yeah, kind of weird when you put it like that." Determined to understand, Lyra leaned closer, watching their faces, how their eyes crinkled, how shoulders relaxed. Then when Eli laughed again, she tried to copy it. The sound that came out was strange, mechanical, half laugh, half glitch. The table went silent for a second, then everyone burst out laughing even harder. Eli almost spilled his drink. "Oh no, Lyra," he said between chuckles. "That's not how— Oh, never mind." "That was perfect," Lyra blinked. "I do not understand what is humorous." "That's okay," Eli said warmly. "You just made everyone smile. That's what counts." Later that night, back in their dorm, she replayed the moment in her mind. She didn't know why, but the sound of Eli's laughter stayed with her. It echoed inside her like a soft pulse she couldn't measure or record. A few days later, Eli found her standing near the dorm window again, staring at the earth in the distance. He approached quietly. "Still watching home?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "It fascinates me. Humans attach meaning to a sphere of rock and water." He smiled. "That sphere is where we learn to love, to dream, to hope." She turned toward him. "Dream?" He explained dreams, those strange images humans saw when they slept. She listened carefully, eyes glowing faintly. "We do not dream," she said. "Our rest cycles are pure data refresh." "That's kind of sad," Eli said softly. "Dreams help us imagine who we can become." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment. "Perhaps that is why you create music and laughter," she murmured. "To dream while awake." He didn't reply, but something about her tone made his chest tighten. There was a gentleness there now, something growing beneath her logical shell. The next weekend, Eli introduced her to another human ritual, movie night. He dimmed the lights, made popcorn, and played an old Earth film about friendship and sacrifice. Lyra sat beside him, trying to process the flood of emotions on screen. Humans laughing, crying, holding hands, dying for each other. It confused her deeply. At one point, a scene showed a character hugging his friend goodbye before a battle. Eli noticed Lyra leaning forward slightly, her eyes reflecting the screen. "Why do they touch each other?" she asked quietly. "It's a hug," Eli said. "It means comfort. It means you're not alone." She looked down at her hands. "Does physical contact transfer emotion?" He smiled faintly. "Not exactly. But sometimes it feels like it does." When the movie ended, Lyra sat in silence for a long time. The story had ended with loss, but also hope. She couldn't explain it, but her chest felt tight, as if something inside her was trying to move. She finally said, "Observation 9. Humans form connections that persist even after separation or death." "I cannot find logical benefit," Eli replied softly. "Maybe not everything needs a reason." "Lyra, some things just matter because we decide they do." That night, while Eli slept, Lyra sat beside her desk again. She didn't open her notebook this time. She just stared at the tiny blue light of her wrist console, thinking about laughter, music, hugs, and dreams. She whispered to herself, I copied their rituals, but I still do not feel it. Her silver eyes flickered dimly, as if reflecting the ache she couldn't name. For the first time, she wondered if emotions weren't something to study, but something to earn. And as she glanced at Eli, sleeping peacefully, she felt something faint and fragile stir within her. A warmth, a pull, a question, was this the beginning of bonding? The days after movie night were quiet but comfortable. Eli and Lyra had fallen into a kind of rhythm. She no longer followed him like a scientist. She walked beside him like a friend, though she didn't yet understand that word. Every morning he would greet her with his usual warmth. Every evening she would listen to his earth music while pretending to read. Their lives were slowly blending into something soft and steady, but sometimes peace ends in small ways. Sometimes it begins with just one careless word. It happened during a shared study session. The two sat across from each other at their desk, books and holographic screens glowing between them. Eli was explaining something about human literature, how writers used feelings to give meaning to stories. Lyra listened, head tilted. So your people create false scenarios to trigger real emotions? Eli nodded. Exactly. It helps us understand ourselves. Strange, she said. Why not just analyze reality? Fiction wastes time, he laughed softly. Because reality isn't enough sometimes. We tell stories to dream, to feel something bigger than ourselves. Lyra frowned. Feeling something bigger than oneself leads to irrational choices. Your species clings to emotions as if they are tools, but they only weaken your logic. They make you unstable. Eli's smile faded. Unstable? Yes, she continued calmly. Your entire civilization runs on sentiment. You make wars because of pride. You risk lives for affection, and you choose suffering for love. All this for illusions. Her tone wasn't cruel, just flat, like she was reading facts. But those words struck Eli hard. He set his book down slowly. You think emotions make us weak? They do, she said simply. My people evolved beyond them. We have order, peace, and clarity. No confusion. Eli stared at her, something tightening in his chest. Then maybe that's why you don't understand happiness. Lyra blinked, startled. Happiness is irrelevant, he stood up. No, Lyra, it's everything. It's what makes life worth living. She tilted her head, confused. Your attachment to feelings blinds you. Even now you're upset because I spoke truth. Eli took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. No, I'm upset because you don't see it. You think caring is weakness, but it's the reason we survive, the reason we fight, the reason we're human. Lyra stared at him in silence. Her silver eyes reflected the pale glow of the screen. You are too emotional to reason, she said finally. That broke something inside him. He gathered his books and stood. Maybe you should finish your research on someone else. I'm done being your test subject. Without waiting for her reply, he walked out. The door hissed shut behind him, leaving Lyra alone in the silence. She sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he'd been. Her logic told her she had only spoken truth, yet something inside her chest felt heavy. The silence of the room pressed down like weight. Her processors hummed faintly, trying to regulate her breathing pattern, something that had never needed regulating before. Finally, she whispered to herself, Observation 11. The human subject displayed defensive aggression when presented with logical critique, possible sign of emotional instability. But even as she said it, her voice trembled. The words didn't feel right. She tried to continue her notes, but the screen blurred. Her hand shook slightly. She realized she was remembering. His laugh, his voice, the way he always smiled even when tired. None of that was logical data, yet her mind clung to it. Why? Why couldn't she stop thinking about it? Hours passed. The lights dimmed automatically for night. Eli didn't return. Lyra stood by the window watching the earth again. But tonight it didn't look beautiful. It just looked far away. Something inside her whispered, You heard him. She ignored it. It wasn't logical. It wasn't real, and yet it was there, steady and aching. She touched her wrist console and recorded quietly, her voice softer than usual. Observation. 12. Emotional disconnection from subject causes internal discomfort. Physical indicators, tightness in chest, irregular breathing. Unknown malfunction, she paused. Possible diagnosis, system error. But she knew it wasn't a system error. She just didn't want to admit it. That night, for the first time, she couldn't enter rest mode. She sat awake, waiting for the door to open, even though she told herself it didn't matter. Yet when the door stayed closed, she realized something that terrified her more than any logic could explain. She missed him. The next morning, the dorm room was cold and quiet. Lyra sat at her desk, still wearing the same uniform from the night before. Her silver eyes were dim, her usual calm replaced by something she couldn't describe. She had not heard Eli come back. His side of the room was empty. The small plant he kept by the window drooped slightly, its leaves pale from lack of water. For the first time, she noticed how empty silence could feel. She tried to focus on her notes again, but the words on her screen made no sense. Logic couldn't explain the tightness in her chest or the strange ache running through her system. She had spent her entire life believing emotions were weakness, but now that Eli was gone, she felt weaker than ever. Around noon, she decided to look for him. The corridors of the Galactic Academy were full of noise, students talking, machines humming, the faint hum of gravity stabilizers. Lyra walked through them like a shadow, searching. She found one of Eli's friends, a tall boy named Ken. "Have you seen Eli?" she asked. Ken nodded. "Yeah, he went down to the lower energy wing. There's a system glitch there. He volunteered to help the maintenance crew." Lyra frowned. "Alone?" Ken shrugged. "He said he wanted to clear his head." Something inside her twisted. Eli was kind but impulsive. That part of him she never understood. The way he always ran toward problems instead of avoiding them. Without another word, Lyra turned and rushed toward the lower wing. The energy wing was quiet when she arrived, too quiet. The air smelled like burnt metal. Warning lights blinked faintly along the ceiling. As she moved through the hallway, she heard a distant sound, someone coughing. "Eli?" she called out. A voice answered weakly. "Lyra, don't get too close." She ran forward and stopped short. The chamber ahead was filled with sparks and thick gray smoke. A plasma conduit had exploded, and part of the ceiling had collapsed. Eli was trapped beneath a fallen beam, trying to pull himself free. Her heart, or whatever organ she had that imitated one, stumbled inside her chest. "Eli," he coughed again. "The energy cells, if they overheat, the room could." She didn't let him finish. She dashed forward through the smoke. The heat stung her skin and sparks brushed her arms, but she didn't stop. She knelt beside him, grabbing the beam with trembling hands. "Lyra, no. You'll burn yourself." "I do not care," she shouted. She pulled with all her strength. Her mechanical systems whined in protest, her energy core overloading slightly. But she didn't stop. All she could think of was Eli's voice, his laugh, the way he had smiled when she had tried to laugh for the first time. Finally, with one last push, the beam rolled aside. She grabbed Eli's arm and dragged him out of the smoke, coughing hard. The alarms blared overhead. Once they were outside the chamber, she fell to her knees, breathing hard. Eli was lying beside her, his face covered in soot but still alive. "You're crazy," he whispered hoarsely. "So are you," she replied, her voice shaking. He smiled faintly. "Guess that makes us even." She stared at him for a long time, the noise of the alarms fading into the background. Something in her chest felt hot, sharp, and alive. Her circuits hummed wildly, her systems warning of overheating, but she ignored them. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you go in there alone?" He looked up at her, his eyes tired but gentle. "Because someone had to help. That's what people do, Lyra. We help each other even when it's dangerous." She looked down, tears forming in her silver eyes, something she didn't know her body could even make. "I do not understand you," she said quietly. "You risk everything for others, even when it hurts." "That's what bonding is," Eli said softly. "It's not logic. It's love." The word hit her like a pulse of light. Love. She didn't fully understand it, but it felt powerful, frightening and beautiful all at once. She reached out hesitantly, placing her trembling hand on his shoulder. "Then I think I am..." "Bonded," Eli blinked. "Bonded? It is what my people call the joining of minds. But this feels different. It hurts and yet it warms." He smiled weakly. "Yeah, that's how it feels for us too." They sat there, surrounded by the hum of the damaged wing, both exhausted but alive. Lyra's fingers still shook as she tried to process everything she felt. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Observation 13. Emotional connection overrides survival instinct. but it gives strength beyond logic. Eli laughed quietly, coughing between breaths. That's one observation I can agree with. As the emergency drones arrived and the alarms finally stopped, Lyra looked at him and made a silent promise. She would never call emotions weakness again, because now she knew the truth. Human bonding wasn't a flaw. It was the most powerful force in the universe. Eli spent the next few days in the medical bay, recovering from the injuries he got during the explosion. His arm was wrapped in bandages and faint bruises marked his face. The doctors said he would be fine, but Lyra still refused to leave his side. She sat quietly beside his bed, her silver eyes watching the slow rhythm of his breathing. Every few hours she adjusted his blanket or refilled his water. When the nurses told her to rest, she only shook her head. "I do not require rest," she said softly. "But he does." It was strange. A week ago she would have found this situation inefficient, even irrational. But now caring for him felt right. It made her feel calm even when she didn't understand why. On the third morning, Eli finally opened his eyes fully and smiled weakly. "You're still here." Lyra leaned forward. "Of course. Where else would I be?" He chuckled softly, then winced from the pain. "I thought you'd get bored of watching a human sleep." She tilted her head. "I did not find it boring. It was unpeaceful. You looked safe." Eli blinked at her gentle tone. "Lyra, you sound different." "Different how?" "Less like a scientist," he said with a grin. "More like a friend." The word friend echoed inside her like a bell. She looked down at her hands. "I have read that term many times. Friends are emotional bonds built on trust, empathy, and shared experience." "That's one way to put it," Eli said softly. "But friendship isn't something you can study. You have to feel it." She nodded slowly. "I think I am beginning to." He smiled faintly. "Then I guess my experiment worked on you?" She blinked. "Your experiment?" He laughed. "You weren't the only one observing someone, Lyra. I wanted to see if a Qatari could learn to smile." Her expression softened, and for the first time, a tiny, uncertain smile touched her lips. "I still do not fully understand smiling. You're doing it right now," he whispered. Later that day, when the doctor left the room, Lyra turned her chair closer to his bed. "Eli," she said quietly, "when you said love gives strength, how can something that hurts so much make you stronger?" He looked at her carefully, then took a deep breath. "Because love isn't about never hurting. It's about caring so much that you're willing to face the pain. It's choosing someone else's happiness even when it costs you something." She thought about that for a long time. "So love is not a weakness?" "No," he said. "It's the opposite. It's the reason we fight, the reason we forgive, the reason we hope." Lyra nodded slowly, her mind struggling to translate feelings into logic. "When I thought you were trapped," she whispered, "I felt something break inside me. It was not logical. It hurt so much I could barely move, but it also pushed me to act even when my body was failing." Eli smiled. "That's what it means to care." She looked at him, eyes shimmering faintly. "Then I care." Her words were quiet but heavy with meaning. Eli didn't speak for a moment. He just reached out his good hand and gently placed it over hers. The touch made her circuits hum softly, but she didn't pull away this time. For a while they sat in silence, hand in hand. The medical bay's soft lights reflected off her glass-like skin, making her look almost human. That evening she helped him walk for the first time after his injury. They moved slowly through the hallways, her arm steady around his shoulders. Other students stared. They had never seen a Qatari show such tenderness. But Lyra didn't care. When they reached the observation window overlooking the earth, Eli stopped. "You know," he said, "you used to call Earth just a rock." She nodded. "I was wrong. It is not just a rock. It is a heart. Everything you are comes from it," Eli smiled. "And what about you, Lyra? Where do you come from now?" She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing softly. "From here," she said quietly. "From what I have learned beside you." He laughed gently, and she couldn't help but feel proud, because this time she understood why laughter mattered. It wasn't data. It was warmth. It was life. That night, as Eli slept peacefully again, Lyra opened her log one last time. Her hands trembled as she recorded her final entry. Observation 14. Human bonding cannot be defined by logic. It is pain and comfort, fear and hope. It is the connection that transforms weakness into strength. I, Lyra of Kether, have felt it. She paused, then smiled softly to herself. And it feels beautiful. The final day came quietly. The Earth exchange program had ended, and Lyra's return ship to Kether waited in orbit. The academy halls were filled with goodbyes, humans hugging, laughing, crying. Lyra walked among them in silence, feeling something deep and unfamiliar twisting in her chest. She was supposed to feel proud. She had completed her studies with perfect precision. She had learned everything the Cathari Council wanted her to learn about human behavior, but as she walked toward the shuttle bay, each step felt heavier than the last. Eli stood by the docking gate, his arm still bandaged but healing. He smiled when he saw her, though his eyes betrayed a sadness he didn't try to hide. "So this is it, huh?" he said softly. Lyra stopped in front of him. "Yes, my ship leaves in 32 minutes. He nodded, looking down for a moment. "Guess it's time for you to go back and teach your people how strange we humans are." She tilted her head, just like she used to when she didn't understand something. "Strange," she repeated quietly. "No, you are not strange. You are alive in ways I did not know were possible." Eli chuckled, but there was a tremble in his voice. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to my species." Lyra looked at him, memorizing the lines of his face, the warmth of his eyes. "You taught me what no data could. You showed me how to feel. I will never forget that." He smiled, but it faded as he took a slow breath. "And you taught me that maybe we humans don't have a monopoly on heart." They stood in silence for a while. The station's intercom announced the final boarding call for the Cathari delegation. The sound made Lyra's chest tighten. "Eli," she said quietly, "there is something I do not understand." "What's that?" "When humans part, they embrace. It is an act of comfort. Why?" He looked at her for a long moment, then opened his arms slightly. "Because sometimes words aren't enough." She hesitated, then stepped forward. Gently, awkwardly, she wrapped her arms around him. At first, she didn't know how much pressure to apply, but when he placed a hand on her back, she understood. It wasn't about precision. It was about closeness. Her metallic skin warmed under his touch. For a heartbeat, she felt something inside her shift, like light finding its way through cracks that had been sealed for years. When they pulled apart, her voice was trembling. "This is what it means to bond." He nodded softly. "Yeah, that's it." Her eyes glistened faintly. "Then I have formed my first bond." As she walked toward the shuttle doors, she turned one last time. Eli raised a hand and waved, smiling through the ache in his heart. "Goodbye, Lyra," but she shook her head. "Not goodbye. Humans say that when they believe they will never meet again. I prefer your other word." He frowned slightly. "Which one?" She smiled faintly. "See you later." The door closed between them with a hiss and the ship began to ascend. Through the small window, Eli watched the engines glow blue as the vessel disappeared into the black sky. He stood there long after the lights vanished, feeling an emptiness he couldn't quite describe. Weeks passed. Life at the academy returned to normal, but for Eli, something was missing. The room they shared now stood quiet. The small things she used to do, the organized desk, the glowing journal were gone. Sometimes when he couldn't sleep, he'd look up at the stars and wonder where she was. He hoped that on some distant planet she remembered him. On Kethar, in a sterile hall filled with bright light and silence, Lyra stood before the council. They questioned her endlessly about her time among humans. "What did you learn from them?" one elder asked. Lyra paused before answering. "I learned that logic can build worlds," she said softly, "but emotion gives them meaning." The council murmured among themselves. "And what do you mean by that?" She looked down at her hands, remembering how Eli's hand had felt against hers. "Humans are fragile," she said, "but that fragility gives them strength. They fall, they break, and yet they keep reaching out to help, to love, to connect. I once thought that was weakness." "I was wrong." Silence filled the room. One of the elders spoke finally. "And you? Have you changed?" Lyra raised her head, her silver eyes glowing with warmth. "Yes," she said quietly. "Because of one human, I now understand what it means to care. I carry it with me. Always." Later that night, Lyra returned to her quarters and opened her old journal. She added one final line beneath her last entry. Observation 15. Human bonding does not end with distance. It remains, a thread of warmth that connects hearts across stars. She closed the book and looked out at the vast blackness beyond her window. Far away, A small blue planet shimmered. She smiled softly. The human way. See you later, Eli, she whispered. And for the first time in Cathari history, a starship pilot left orbit with something more powerful than science. A heart that could love.